we can make you stronger, louder, brighter, all with classic good looks. So I think it's time we just jump straight in and see how many mods we can add to this rescued Game Boy. So let's open this Game Boy up and start modding. So we can just move the screen out of the way for the minute. We're just going to concentrate on the main board for the moment. So I'm going to take out these screws here. So let's just whip those out quickly. I'm not going to dwell on this because we did this in the last video. I'm just going to swap out these battery contacts for some nice new ones that came in the post the other day. So let's just put the new ones in. So firstly, I'm going to install the clean power board from Retro 6. This is just to give a nice clean power delivery. So we're just going to solder in these wires here. So let's just flux it up just to get the old solder off. So I'm just using some solder wick here. And the flux just helps the old solder soak up into the copper braid. Let's just loosen these off with a bit of extra heat. Oh, there we go. Now we can pop on the new power board, and you want to just make sure you line up the red wire with the red label. So just holding that in with a bit of Kapton tape. Gonna just add a bit of extra flux just to help the solder flow. Just solder each of these points in turn. So for improved sound, I'm going to install this Retro 6 amplifier for the Game Boy. So let's just hold that down in place. What I'm going to do is just add a bit of flux to each of the points, and then what I'm going to do is just pre-tin all of these. So just don't want it moving around. So let's just go and pre-tin all these points now. There we go. These ones will be for the speaker. And this one connects up to the audio board, and that one connects to the power. Alright, let's just move that out of the way and just add a bit of extra fresh solder to all the points we're going to solder onto. This one was a little bit of fiddly. I had to sort of melt away a little bit of the cable, but we got there in the end. There we go. Now we can pop the board in place. And we're just going to solder it to each of those points that we've just pre-tinned. So let's just work our way around now. Careful not to burn my fingers. Wouldn't be the first time. Just add a bit of extra flux and we can get that last one. There we go. I think we got it now. That's better. Let's add the phone one. There we go. And finally, this just taps into the 5-volt power supply. I think we got it. So here's the new speaker. It's actually quite a lot smaller than the old speaker, which is surprising. But let's add it on anyway. I might actually go back and see if I can find a speaker that's the right size. I think I'd prefer that, but hopefully this one will do for now. And I think we could just pop this board back in place for a second. Well, I think what I want to do is actually just test that the amplifier is working. So I'm just going to pop it into the old shell, pop some batteries in, and just check that the amplifier is actually working before we go any further. Let's just pop in the batteries. Now we can just flip it over, and we can just, I'm just going to grab a screwdriver, I think, just to flick that switch. Nice, and we're getting sound. Excellent. Right. Now let's carry on with the build. So let's start adding all the gubbins into the new Retro 6 case. So I'm just going to add in the D-pad and the buttons there. I'm going to add in the start and select buttons. Just want to make sure they locate down onto the little tabs. Now we can put in the membranes. There we go. Let's just make sure that's lined up properly. That's better. Let's turn our attention to the screen now. So it's just going to slide it in here into this mounting bracket. This just helps us get the screen totally flush and lined up with the aperture for the screen on the case. You can sort of see here, you want to make sure it lines up so that you get access to that little plug there. And the ribbon cable sort of comes around. It looks a bit short. I'm not quite sure that's the right way this ribbon cable should go, but let's go with it for the minute. We can just attach it in here onto the board. Just pop those little tabs in. So let's get the double-sided tape in place. So I'm just going to lay that down and push it flat. There we go. Just get rid of the backing. Nice. Just get rid of this part out the middle as well. Oh, just peeling that up a bit. Let's just be a bit more careful. There we go. Just push that back down where it could come up slightly. Just make sure it's not visible anywhere. There we go. Let's just pop in that little plastic lug there for the LED. Now let's see if we can get this board in. So let's take off the protective layer. See if we can get it lined up. Okay, this isn't going so great. It's all shifted round. That isn't right. I think we're going to have to look at this again. So let's take it out. And I think what I'm going to do is just install the screen first without it attached to the main board. There we go. And what I'll do is then attach the screen to the motherboard separately. So let's grab that now. Let's pop that in place as well. And then what I'm going to try and do is actually feed the ribbon cable round, but it's quite short. This is a bit of a faff. I really don't think I'm doing this quite right. So don't take this as a how-to. This is just me trying to work it out as I go along. Right, there we go. I think I finally got it. Just push the lugs back in to hold that in place. What I did was I actually took out the plastic guide. Now I'm just going to slot that back in place. And I think what I should have done is actually fed that ribbon cable through that gap there. But because it was all taped down, I don't think I really thought to do that. But it's all together now. And I don't really want to take it all apart. But maybe when you're doing this, feed the ribbon cable through that little gap. I think that would be much more sensible. But anyway, let's just get this bad boy all screwed back together. And I forgot the power switch again, just like in my last Game Boy video. I think they're my nemesis. So let's just lift the board slightly and slot that in place. There we go. And we can screw the main motherboard back into place now. So this is the headphone jack here. We're just going to screw that in. Obviously we're screwing into virgin plastic, so we need to put a little bit more effort into those screws. But the screws that came with the kit from Retro 6, they are actually self-tapping screws. So they go in a lot easier than some other kits I've done. My last Game Boy Advance that I did, the screws were an absolute nightmare to try and fit in because they weren't self-tappers. But yeah, these ones actually screwed in really quite well. So now we've done that, let's add the ribbon cable from between the screen to the main motherboard. There we go. It was so tight though. I really struggled to get this fitted. Get that onto the motherboard. It was really hard to do it without actually creasing the ribbon cable, but I got there in the end. Now we just need to put the speaker in place. It just sort of glues in and sticks on with a sticky pad. So yeah, I'd rather it clipped in, to be honest, but there we go. It is what it is. I'll see if I can get a replacement at some point, but now we can just screw everything back together. Now it's time to put on the final screen protector. So let's just peel off the double-sided tape. Get that middle bit off too. It's a bit of a pain. It's all coming away. Got there in the end though. So I'm just going to slide it in to one side and then gently press down so that it all lines up nicely. That's looking pretty smart actually. Sort of those classic good looks that you want from a Game Boy. So I've got a USB-C rechargeable battery that I've got from, where did I go from? Robot Retro. So let's slide that into place. Hopefully this is going to power things nicely with all those added extras. I think it's time to turn this bad boy over, stick in a game and test it out. Moment of truth, and right, okay, there's something wrong. Something's not quite working. Yeah, that's not right. So I went back in, I resoldered all of my joints on the power board. Power switch in case there's some kind of resistance happening, but it had been working with AA's, so I'd be surprised if it was that, but it was worth a shot. And just adding a bit of fresh solder to the battery terminals again in case we're getting a bit of a cold joint or a bit of resistance, but none of that worked. So I'm just going to test it out with some AA's just to see if we can get it working. And it's working. Okay, that's really odd. So I'm not sure if it's the battery at fault or the Game Boy, but I'm probably going to have to do a bit of further investigation. But I think for this video, let's just roll with the AA batteries. Anyway, I think we should just take a little look at the settings of the screen. So if we push the left wheel, we get a menu up here. Yep, there we go. So it's a bit hard to see, but you can adjust the brightness of the screen by pushing up or down. If you click inwards, you can go through some to the different settings. You can change the different colorways. Personally, I prefer the classic green look, which I think is setting number 4 or number 3. There we go. You can turn on or off the grid lines. I personally preferred it with the grid lines, so I'm going to keep the grid lines switched on. And you can fiddle around with the other settings, but to be honest, I didn't notice any difference with those. But yeah, it works. Pretty pleased. Hopefully we can get the battery issue sorted. But anyway, now I think, so the ultimate Game Boy really needs the ultimate amount of memory. So let's put in a flash cart so we can take all of our games with us. And let's just check it's all working properly. Yeah. So it's boosted into the menu so we can scroll down and choose Game Boy games in English. There we go. And yeah, let's find Mario, I think. Let's find Mario and have a little go of that. Excellent, and it seems to be working great. Let's just give it a little go. I think we've got a pretty nice bright screen. We've got a lovely crisp picture, and we've got those sort of classic looks with the grid lines. I think now we should just take a little look at the audio and see what difference happens between the old speaker and the new Retro 6 amplifier. So here's the original audio at maximum before we did any modifications, and you can see we're sort of hitting about 45-50 decibels. We had a max of 60 and the average was 25 decibels. Now we have the new amplified Game Boy, and you can see already we're getting up to like 60, and we had a max of 77 decibels and an average of 40 decibels, so quite a noticeable difference. And with that, our stealth Game Boy build is complete. The new screen looks fantastic, the colours are really vibrant, it's pin sharp. The only complaint I really have is the fact that the installation instructions were a little bit on the vague side, and I think if they hadn't capped on taped down that ribbon cable, I would have thought about doing a slightly cleaner, better install. But overall, pretty pleased. The CleanAmp Pro, that's another great upgrade for the Game Boy. The sound quality is noticeably louder without actually compromising on quality, and there was no additional distortion. My only real complaint was the fact that the speaker was smaller and didn't fit into the shell correctly. I might be able to get a new one off of eBay, but it would have been nice if that had fitted out of the box. Not every upgrade was a success, so the USB battery, we just couldn't get it working. The good news is Robot Retro have said they're going to take a little look at it for me just to make sure that the battery is not faulty. But there's every chance, you know, this was a rescued Game Boy. It didn't work. There was a lot of corrosion on the main board. So there's every chance that it's actually a fault on the Game Boy motherboard. I'll keep you updated in the comments and let you know what happens. But anyway, compared to that corroded, lifeless Game Boy that we started with, I'd say this project was pretty much a success. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care and goodbye.